Welcome back to the Vanessa G Fitcast. I'm Vanessa Pozos, and here with me is Omar Pozos, my co-host and husband. And today, this is episode 200.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Wow. That's amazing. Woo. Ready? Hold on. Which one are we going to go with? Woo. That's amazing.
You and your sound effects, man. How crazy. 200 weeks of recording podcasts with me.
200 weeks of nothing but craziness with Vanessa and Omar.
Yeah. I mean, gosh, I wonder if there's anybody out there who's actually listened to all 200 episodes.
If it is, send us a message and I will buy you coffee or something.
People could just lie and be like, yeah, I've listened to all 200.
All right. Fair enough.
And then suddenly we're buying 1 million coffees for people. Like, wow, so many people just love the podcast. No, I mean, if you have listened to, whether or not it's been all 200, because that would be a stretch. If you've listened to a lot of episodes, or even if you've just listened on and off since the beginning of time of the Vanessa G Fitcast, I appreciate you. I appreciate you hanging out. Or maybe you're new here. Maybe you kind of just recently found us. And honestly, that's probably a good thing because we've grown a lot over these 200 episodes. In a lot of ways, and I don't know that our podcasting abilities have necessarily improved all that much.
Listen, one of my friends texted me the other day, and they said that I have a very good podcasting / radio voice. They said I sound very smooth, so I will take it.
Okay. Well, episode 200. Very excited to continue on this path with you guys. But today we're actually continuing a little bit of a series from last week. So last week, episode 199, we talked about insulin resistance and blood sugar. We talked about really how to kind of optimize, or more so, we talked about how optimizing your insulin and your blood sugar can impact how you feel, how you look, your body composition, and ultimately, if you're on a weight loss journey, or more so just wanting to optimize how you look and feel, how important insulin, that hormone, is in that journey. And we talked a little bit more about the science behind it to really help you guys understand how does this actually work within the body, to empower you with that knowledge so you understand how it actually works. And we started to talk a little bit about how to actually track blood sugars, what that looks like, what to be looking for, symptoms of being a little bit more insulin resistant or on the path to insulin resistance, and all of that. So if you haven't listened to that episode yet, I would recommend that you start there before diving into this episode, because here we're going to build on that now. And now that we understand how blood sugars work in the body, how insulin works, and how it all affects your body and your body's ability to burn body fat, store body fat, build muscle, things like that. Now we're going to talk about how to actually go about balancing your blood sugars and optimizing this kind of system within the body so that we can achieve all of our body composition and health goals. So let's start with a little bit of a story. So Susie,
story time with Vanessa.
Yeah. So gather around, children. Susie just started a business. And so she's a crazy busy business owner. Things are taking off. She's working all the time, busier than ever. She's sleeping, 5 to 7 hours a night at best. She often forgets to eat meals. Sometimes she's just too busy. She doesn't even really have an appetite, or she tends to just feel more stressed than anything. She forgets about eating food. She does often find that she binge eats at night. Typically, she will go through those kind of work days where she's super busy, misses some meals, and then she tends to overeat at nighttime. She tends to kind of let loose a little bit more on the weekends, eat a little bit bigger meals on the weekends, eat out a little bit more. And ultimately, she's carrying a little bit of extra weight that she doesn't really want to continue to carry. She's always kind of had this propensity to carry a little bit more weight. And so because of that, she has been kind of on that yo-yo dieting cycle of things. In the past, that was a lot of restrictive diets. She tried all the fad diets, all the different things. All of them would typically lend themselves to losing a bit of weight, gaining it back, kind of just being on that yo-yo dieting cycle that so many of us know so well. So nowadays, Susie here, this busy business owner, here she is carrying a little bit more weight, not feeling her best. She's noticed that her energy is a little bit lower, and she started actually listening to the Vanessa G Fitcast recently.
Thank you, Susie, for listening.
Yes, thank you, Susie. And she tuned in to episode 199 and all about insulin resistance. And as she was listening to this, she was absolutely shocked. here she is, someone who has been very health conscious. She's always really been pretty in tune with her health overall. She's done some different styles of HIIT workouts, even though lately she's very aware that she hasn't been as active. She's just busy. She doesn't really have time to go on walks or do different things, but she just still considers herself overall a very healthy person. She eats healthy foods and she just makes overall health conscious decisions. But as she was listening to episode 199, she realized something. She realized that she's resonating with a whole lot of the symptoms of having imbalanced blood sugars and of being on that path toward insulin resistance. She's noticing again that she's like having a little more trouble losing the weight, even more so than in the past. She's noticing that she is starting to have some mood changes. She has a little bit more anxiety, a little bit more depression. She's kind of been writing those things off as like, well, yeah, I'm stressed. Of course I'm gonna be more anxious. Of course I'm gonna be more depressed. But nonetheless, she's kind of noticing those things and it's starting to pique her interest of, man, maybe my blood sugars have something to do with this. Maybe that's why I'm a little bit more irritable. On top of that, she definitely has energy crashes, especially in the afternoon time. And she has these just constant sugar cravings that will not go away. Seems like they're just worse than they've ever been. So nonetheless, Susie here, she's realizing, oh my gosh, I think my blood sugars might be at play here. So what's going on here? What is actually happening for Susie? Any guesses there, Omar?
I don't know. She's insulin resistant. Is that where we're going? Is this where we're going with this?
Yeah. So this story.
Did you notice how my voice dropped? I'm like, she's insulin resistant.
You're like whispering to me, like, is that the correct answer?
Yeah, tell me.
No. So really, Susie, yes, that's exactly what I was kind of getting at there. She is on the path towards insulin resistance. So Susie, she is this type of person where she's kind of like your classic woman who is just healthy and wouldn't ever expect herself to be on the path towards pre-diabetes and even diabetes. Like you would never expect that from somebody like her. She's not hugely overweight. She doesn't, live this like crazy unhealthy lifestyle. She's kind of like your normal, everyday, busy adult American woman, right? But what's happening? She's so busy right now. Her business is taking off. She often finds herself skipping breakfast because she just wants to jump right into work and she doesn't really have that much of an appetite in the morning. And she's kind of like read a little bit that, maybe skipping breakfast, doing this intermittent fasting thing, that might help me lose weight anyway. So might as well do that. So she skips breakfast. She just grabs a coffee. She sweetens that coffee sometimes because she's got a little bit of that sweet tooth, remember? And now what's happening is this combo in the morning of her sleeping that less than 7 hours, probably even more like 5 hours many nights. On top of that, she wakes up and she's not eating breakfast. She's just having coffee. So she's having this already starting off the day with a little bit of a blood sugar surge because she's not sleeping well. That's going to cause our blood sugar to go up. Now add caffeine. That's going to cause our blood sugar to go up. Now add that she's stressed because, who wouldn't be in her situation? So that mental stress, that's going to cause her blood sugar to go up. Cortisol and blood sugar do have that relationship there, remember, like we've talked about. And so ultimately she's having this like big rise of blood sugar across the morning. And as that rises up really high, her body, again, remember how we talked about what happens with her pancreas? It's sensing that, oh my gosh, blood sugar's going up. We got to do something about that. Let's pump out some insulin. This big surge of insulin coming in to bring her blood sugar down. Now she's having a blood sugar crash. Well, that blood sugar crash, that's leading to this drop in energy where she might be feeling like, man, I just always have this like crash of energy mid-morning or mid-afternoon. And so with that crash of energy, she's like, you know what? Feel like I'm starting to have those cravings. I'm not even that hungry, but I just like want to eat something. So maybe because she's health conscious, maybe she's like, I'm just going to, grab a quick smoothie from the place next door. And when she grabs that smoothie, it's probably just a lot of carbs. Of course, like there's some good nutrient dense fruits in there, but it's probably low in fat, probably low in protein. So now having this big high carb, high calorie meal, she's having another surge in blood sugars. What's happening? Again, kind of repeating, big dump of insulin, big drop in blood sugars. Again, having a crash, probably feeling more stressed, probably now feeling irritable and anxious and just not feeling great overall. Ultimately, that leads her towards the end of the day. She finally can like actually let go and calm down. She's like, okay, I've wrapped up my workday. I'm just going to relax for a little bit. that just feeling of like, oh, okay, I can relax a little bit, that drop in cortisol in tune with your body's natural drop in cortisol in the evenings as well. Now she has a big surge in those cravings because her body senses this big drop in cortisol and it's thinking, okay, we need to get some blood sugar in here to give her a little bit more energy to get through the rest of the evening. And so what happens? Maybe she even eats like a very healthy, balanced, nutritious dinner, but she suddenly finds herself feeling completely out of the control, just like digging through the pantry, digging through the fridge, eating anything and everything. And what happened? Is she just this like lazy person who has no self-control? No, this is a physiological response in her body via the blood sugar just management system in her body at the end of the day.
I'm going to pick on Susie a little bit because I speak to a lot of Susies on a daily basis. I mean, myself included. I mean, we're going through a time right now where, like, Vital Spark is very, very busy. We're having a wait list till like January, February to work with my team. And so you and I are very much at our desk 24/7. And I experience some of these things. I was just telling you the other day where sometimes I'm like, I feel like I'm like very like lightheaded. And I'm like, I feel like I'm going to pass out. Like I need to be better with my consistency. But anyways, my point being is this. A lot of the Susies that I talk to, like right off the bat, they're like, hey, I eat super healthy. I'm like, I eat organic, like no added sugars, everything, no processed meals and everything like that. And I'm like, okay, that's fantastic. I'm like, well, let's dive a little bit more into what nutrition actually looks like. Right off the bat, I'm like, all right, so like, for example, what did you have for breakfast? And I was just telling you this yesterday, but I talked to somebody and they're like, well, it was like 12 o'clock our time. And she was like, well, I've had like half a bagel for breakfast. I'm like, okay, well, that might be part of the problem. Like you can be eating everything, whole foods, nutritious, nothing processed. But if you're not eating, like you said, consistent meals with the right amounts or the right balance of meals where you're just not spiking that sugar, those glucose levels, it still ends up causing more harm than good. And that's what I think people forget to realize. It's like, sure, you can be eating, natural foods and great choices when it comes to foods, but it's the quality the quantities or the types of foods that you're eating that also has a big contributing factor. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a reason why so many women now are getting diagnosed with PCOS, and a lot of them, it is a insulin resistant PCOS kind of manifesting from these poor blood sugar regulation habits that so many women have developed because we're stressed, we're busy, we're not paying great attention to our nutrition, or we're paying attention to our nutrition in the wrong ways where, like you're saying, we're very focused on eating, very healthy foods, very organic foods, and like all these different things, which is great. Like that's awesome. But that is one piece of the puzzle. You're missing a lot of variables if that's all you're focused on. So let's talk about that, because I think the reason I wanted to start with that story is, even though we've talked about, some symptoms and how it works in the body and different things last week, I wanted to give a story that I think a lot of women will resonate with pieces of that story to realize how much so many people are dealing with imbalanced blood sugars. We talked about, you and I both have dealt with imbalanced blood sugars, and a big part of that is not because we're just like some, unhealthy people that are just like eating sugar all day or anything like that. I think that's what people think when they think of, oh, poor blood sugar. That's what they think of. Where it really comes from for us, I think, is stress, because we do live a high stress lifestyle. We run a fast growing startup business, and inherently that's going to come with stress. And so that's why it's extra important to manage all these variables to help support this system within our body.
I mean, even the thing that you mentioned about like the sleep, and I have to get better at this, is something that I'm working on. But we are done with work at like 8 o'clock at night. By the time we eat dinner, it's like 9:30. And then what do? I get on my phone and I'm awake till like 10:30, and then I wake up at 6 a.m. I'm like, I've got to get better, because I've got to give my body a little bit of a break there to, like what you were saying, not have my body wake up and have that surge of like stress be on top of mine. First thing I do when I look at my phone, I'm looking at emails, I'm looking at stuff. I'm like, I've got to get better at stuff like that. But it's the little habits like that you can start to pick up on and be like, oh, okay, like that makes a big difference. Well, then I'm going to do those lifestyle changes, as opposed to, again, PCOS. The biggest thing we hear is, they go to a doctor and it's, well, just get on birth control, right? Mm-hmm. So there's so many other, like you were saying, factors and lifestyle changes that you can implement to help with navigate all these things.
Absolutely. Well, let's dive into it. So I want to share a few of like more foundational types of blood sugar balancing strategies that we often work on within our clients. And I hope that from this episode, you can focus on maybe one of these habits to say, that one thing, I'm going to walk away with this and I'm going to focus on implementing this into my life. As always, anytime we try and implement all the things, that typically doesn't set us up well for success. So I encourage you, as you listen to this, what is your lowest hanging fruit and start there. So number one of the biggest things we can do to really balance our blood sugars using our nutrition is consistent meal timing. So many women get this wrong. Like I talked about, how many women do we talk to? They say like, yeah, I eat really healthy. And it's like, okay, walk me through a day in the life of eating. And it's like, well, I don't really normally eat breakfast. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't.
My favorite is when they're like, well, it's not normally like this, but today it was. I'm like, okay.
And to be clear, you guys, we're not, we don't tease by any means with that because we get it. Like
it's hard.
We used to be that way too before we learned this stuff. And that's why it's so important to learn and understand and to get help with these things. So when it comes to consistent meal timing, what I always encourage is eating within 2 hours of waking up. So for my intermittent fasters out there, obviously, that's not going to fly if our blood sugars are off. There can be a time and place for implementing some fasting. With women, it's not typically going to be a good long-term strategy. Our hormones are going to be extra sensitive to kind of that blood sugar regulation and our cortisol surges. And fasting is going to be hard on both of those two things. So that's where anytime we are working on our blood sugars overall, first things first, I want to make sure that we are eating breakfast and eating within 2 hours of waking up. Even if you can get that down to like within an hour of waking up, that's going to help even more because we want to kind of break that overnight fast of your body's okay and your body's knows how to navigate sleeping through the night without food. That's what these systems are for. But once we wake up, cortisol starts to rise. We need to make sure that we eat something to bring cortisol back down. Otherwise, cortisol rising is going to cause our blood sugars to start shooting up in more of that unmanaged way. That's going to lead to, like we were talking about with that Susie story, not feeling our best. So I really encourage you, eat breakfast. That's like step number one. But beyond that, throughout the day, a good kind of rule of thumb is to eat every 3 to 4 hours. So a balanced meal every 3 to 4 hours, not like grab a handful of something every 3 to 4 hours, like a
handful of nuts that normally, or fruit that people normally do.
Yeah, like taking a little nibble of my kids' leftover lunch at the end of the day. No, like we need to actually have real meals every 3 to 4 hours. We'll often even tighten that up even more for, clients that may be coming in with a lot of adrenal fatigue, like a lot of really taxed out adrenals. We might want to shorten that window to even 2 to 3 hours and do smaller meals because ultimately what we're kind of trying to do there is like think of there being like this threshold of like how low you want blood sugars to go and how high you want blood sugars to go. We want to kind of like keep it between that threshold. And so if we go too long without eating, it's probably going to go outside that threshold. If we don't eat balanced meals, it's going to go outside that threshold.
It can go super low or it can go super high.
Exactly. Yeah. So sometimes even just having smaller but still balanced meals in every like 2 hours or so, that might be what we need to just kind of keep it managed, keep it where it needs to be. Number two, when it comes to nutrition, another really baseline habit we need to build is managing our fiber intake. Now, the exact amount of fiber can vary per person because especially if we're dealing with gut issues, it might look different as opposed to somebody else. But ultimately, bare minimum, women should be shooting for 25 grams of fiber per day. We often will work that up even higher, more to like 40 to 50 grams for a lot of women because that can absolutely help with, again, balancing blood sugars overall. So the way that fiber really works in the body is it helps slow that release of glucose from carbs. So fiber itself is going to be in carbs, but when you pair fiber with glucose, with the sugar, the fiber almost like grabs onto things and like makes it more of like a slow trickle into the bloodstream as opposed to like this fire hose of sugar going out. So eating a little bit more fiber, that could come from things like maybe opting for brown rice instead of white rice, maybe ensuring that we eat the skin on the fruits that we're eating, or like the skin on the potatoes and things like that.
I like skin on the potatoes.
100%, yeah.
Personally. Or even sweet potatoes.
Shooting for more just like fibrous veggies, like literally just Google fiber, high fiber foods, stick to those foods or just incorporate more of those foods in. That's going to be really, really helpful for your body. Number 3, macronutrient balance. So this is why a kind of foundational thing that we work on with almost every client is starting to build awareness around our macronutrients. So we might, depending on like the client's knowledge level, experience level with these things, we might start with calories first and then move into macronutrients. But it's so important that at some point we work on bringing awareness to our macros, our carbs, protein, and fats for this reason. if you are not bringing awareness to your macronutrient intake, maybe you're just focused on calories, what could happen? Maybe you end up eating these meals that are really high in carbs and low in protein or fat. Or you could even be someone like, because again, this is where like a lot of people who are, they've always considered themselves to be very healthy, very health conscious, they can still have these issues. And that might be that maybe you eat really high protein meals. Maybe you eat low carb overall and your meals are very high in protein. Well, guess what? Your body wants that blood sugar so bad, it will convert protein into carbs to get the sugars that it needs if you continuously eat low carb. It's just now you're adding a more inefficient process of getting your blood sugars up, which is a whole nother path I could go down on a different episode. But again, this is like, it doesn't have to be someone who's eating a high carb diet. Yeah, exactly. A lot of women who are eating low carb diets actually have a lot of blood sugar issues.
I did not know that.
Yeah. So that's where just ultimately we want to start building balanced plates. So it's like, think of almost step one. Let's make sure we're eating every 3 to 4 hours. We're eating a breakfast in the morning. Now let's look at what those meals actually look like. Let's make them balanced across our macronutrients. That might look like having half of your plate being like some fruits and some veggies, or just like something higher fiber. Maybe a quarter of your plate is going to be that carb source, maybe, like some rice or some potato, things like that. And then maybe a quarter of the plate is going to be that protein source, more of like the chicken, the steak, the fish, things like that. Obviously, not all meals like fit into that kind of a diagram per se, but that's just something to think about visualizing to make sure that all your macronutrients are present. Fat, that one, I don't necessarily like always visualize on the plate in that way, because that's typically going to be mixed into things that might be like
oils,
eating. Yeah, butters. Exactly. It might be the oils, the butters. It might be a higher fat protein source, things like that. But make sure that you do have a fat source mixed in there as well.
Can I add something in there too? Because I know, example, going back to Susie and her story, she's already busy. She's waking up early, going to bed late because of work. The last thing she wants to do is probably take the time to track all these things, right? Now, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the goal of this is not to track for the rest of your life. The goal is just to bring awareness, right? Because again, right now it's, and I like this analogy a lot, but it's like, when you have a child that's trying to ride a bike, sometimes, and you don't have those training wheels, it makes the process that much easier. P.S. Vanessa still to this day has fears around bicycles, so we have to maybe put her on some training wheels.
Bikes are scary, okay?
But anyways, my point being is you have to kind of go through the process for a little bit so that you can get to a place where you're like, okay, now I understand. Now I can visually see what this looks like, and then kind of give that to my body. Is that, what would you say there?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that that's a good analogy, that like tracking your macros is like the training wheels on the bike to be able to actually start to have good habits with our nutrition. I always like the quote, what isn't measured isn't managed. So if we aren't in some form or fashion measuring our nutrition, and I think there's a lot of like negative connotations around measuring, because people have done like the measurement. Yeah, they've done the measurement process with nutrition in very restrictive ways. The way that we do it with our clients is actually removing the restriction and helping just bring in the knowledge awareness around that. But yes, exactly. Tracking macros doesn't necessarily have to happen in order to get to this outcome of having macronutrient balanced meals. There's a lot of different methods that we use with our clients as well. A good kind of rule of thumb here when it comes to building balanced meals overall is just don't eat naked carbs. Naked carbs, that would be eating like a carb source with no fat or no protein with it. Think of like just oatmeal with blueberries for breakfast in the morning, or maybe just eating sweet potato as a snack, or just having like a juice as a snack. Like those are naked carbs. You're just eating the carb alone. Those are great, nutritious, wonderful food choices, but when eaten alone without any protein or fat in there, you're going to send your blood sugar on a roller coaster ride, and that's not what you want.
And not a fun one, huh?
No, not fun. Number 4, this one should be no surprise because we've talked about this quite a bit already, but this is where bringing in more of the lifestyle aspect of things, we got to manage stress. Stress. This is obviously one that a lot of people struggle with. Stress can show up in a lot of ways. We talked about the example with Susie of like, being a business owner, like there's a lot of inherent stress that comes with that. There could be physiological stress coming from a lot of areas, or not physiological, mental stress coming from a lot of areas in your life, from, relationships or family, work, all the different things. Maybe you are moving, like maybe, there's financial stress, like whatever it is, there could be a lot of mental stress going on. Obviously, just finding ways to work through that. We've had many episodes where we dive into those types of things. But what I really specifically want to hit on here is the physiological stress on the body and how that impacts the body. Physiological stress can show up in a lot of ways. This could be, like we talked about, poor sleep. That is stress on the body. So if we're not getting enough sleep or we're just not getting great quality of sleep, that's going to be stressful. So like even think of like our postpartum moms. Obviously, sleep is not going to be in the best spot during that time of your life. So it's like, okay, we know that that's a variable right now, that it's hard to kind of change, and we might just need to be working off of that. So knowing that our stress is going to be high because of that on the body, what else can we do to keep stress low in other areas? Think of like your body's stress capacity as this overall bucket that we're filling up. And there's going to be some areas of your life where it's like, yeah, it is. It's just going to be stressful. It just is what it is. It's a phase of life, and that's just how it is. How can I lower stress in other areas of my life then? That might mean making sure I'm fueling my body appropriately, eating enough food. That will lower stress in the body. Under-eating is a form of stress. Making sure that we are training appropriately. So we're getting in exercise, but not overtraining. Overtraining is a big form of stress on the body. So again, like a postpartum mom, we're not going to go into a calorie deficit. We're not going to go do these intense workouts because your body is probably going to look a lot worse than it did before because you're already in a stressed state. So is this making sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's the one thing, the one thing is like under eating is a form of stress. I think a lot of people don't realize that. And they're like, well, like, I'm a mom, or I've got, family, financial stress, all these things are like, but like, I can't fix that. So, I still need to focus on the things that I can control. In this case, the nutrition, the self-care. I mean, like I know yesterday you and I had a long day, and I was just exhausted. We're like, you know what? Let's just go do some sauna, some cold plunging, and just get our body out of this, physical state that we were in and into a much better one where I did have a much better sleep, which then helped me into today, which hopefully will kind of start trickling into those benefits for me,
Yeah, I think it's also a feedback loop of like acknowledging
that's a good point.
When we are stressed, it's like, okay, is this stress coming from more of like the way I'm thinking about the stressors in my life, or is it more so coming from like the physical side of these stressors on my body? Because it's like you could have someone who's in a calorie deficit, they're training really hard, they're, doing like they just, their lifestyle might be inherently kind of stressful, but maybe they manage their mind around it super well. They have just really great emotional regulation skills. Maybe they have a therapist. Maybe they are really like in touch with their faith, like whatever it is. Maybe they just manage their mind really well. And those stressors don't have quite the impact as they would if the situation was different. So I think that's a big part of it too. And then also just noticing of like, sometimes it's hard to manage our minds when our bodies are really stressed out. We're feeling more anxious, like that physical feeling in the body makes it really hard to manage your mind. So that's where you might need to change your physical state to then start to change your mental state. Like you were saying, we had to kind of go and be like, okay, we need to change our physical state here. Sauna, cold plunge, great. Now the body's feeling better. Now we can really manage our mind here. Mm-hmm. So stress is a big one. We could really go down that path for a while. That could look like even past traumas, needing to work through that in the body. That could seriously be having an impact on your blood sugars. Infections, dealing with like sickness, disease. Like I know when we had COVID over the summer, my blood sugars were off for a while.
I still don't know if I had COVID, to be honest. I think it was just cold.
You did, just because I'm the only one that tests for it. But yes, 100%. Like getting sick, you're going to notice your blood sugars are going to be off after that too. Next on the list, number 5, low intensity movement paired with strength training. So this is where we start to tackle more of like the movement side of our blood sugar balancing habits. I really, really encourage anytime I suspect or know that somebody is dealing with some blood sugar imbalances, we've got to pull back on training intensity and really focus on low intensity movement, really just kind of supporting the body, keeping stress low, but getting the movement in. I specifically say, though, low intensity movement paired with strength training because it's important that we are still working on building muscle, because muscle is going to be really helpful for overall insulin resistance anyway. Remember we talked about last week how blood sugars do get stored in the muscle as well. The more muscle you have, the more storage capacity you have for those blood sugars. It's like, especially if you are, maybe you are dealing with PCOS, strength training, it's going to be really, really helpful. Please drop the cardio, get rid of the HIIT classes, stop going to CrossFit. Those things, those are not helping your blood sugars. Let's do low intensity movement, like going for walks, some nice relaxing swimming or hiking, or even like some easier kind of bar classes, easier Pilates classes, easier yoga classes. I'm really pre-framing with the easier because I know some people that will be like, oh yeah, I do yoga. And it's like, tell me about that. Oh, I do like the
hot yoga with.
Yeah, the power yoga at the like hot yoga studio. And I'm like, that's not low intensity. So keeping that in mind as well. But even like something as simple, if you're not, having great like movement routines right now, something as simple as just trying to go for 10 to 15 minute walks after meals, that will really, really help with those 2-hour postprandial blood sugar readings for sure. In terms of the training, so we talked about kind of adding in a little bit more strength training, how that's going to help you. I really, really want to emphasize here, if you know or suspect you are dealing with blood sugar imbalances, HIIT style workouts, high intensity style workouts, those are going to continue to make things worse. And the reasoning for that is because those styles of training are going to raise your cortisol. And remember, like we've talked about, cortisol and blood sugars are interconnected. So you're going to find that you end up on a blood sugar roller coaster. Last one on the list, and I saved this for last, and I even hesitated to put this on this list with this episode, but I think it's still important to throw out there as well. This is where supplementation can also be helpful. When I said initially, pick one thing on this list to focus on, this is not the one thing to focus on, you guys. I'm just adding this in here for pure kind of helping you bring awareness to help, like ways that you can help your blood sugars overall. So if you're like, boom, check, I am doing all those 5 other things perfectly, I am a model student, this is great. This is where number 6 on the list, supplements, could come in handy for you. So there are some really great supplements that can specifically help with blood sugar regulation. Berberine, glucose bitters, apple cider vinegar, those have all been shown to help with balancing blood sugars. There's also herbs such as cinnamon can help lower blood sugar. So even like putting some cinnamon on foods that you like to pair with it. Like I always like putting cinnamon in my oatmeal or on apples, things like that. That can
Where
be
my
helpful.
mind went was, I'm like, all right, this is exactly what's going to happen. Somebody's going to be like, okay, so like I'm doing everything, or they're going to be like, whatever, I don't have time, so I'm just going to put cinnamon on like my latte. And Vanessa said that that's going to help regulate my sugars, and that is not how that's going to work.
Yeah, yep. And remember, supplements are supplemental to the diet, the movement, the lifestyle changes. So how many times do people come to us and they're taking all these different supplements? They don't even know what the supplements do. They don't know if they're working or if they're helping them at all. Like you're just flushing money down the drain, just taking supplements on top of not having a good foundation of these things. We have to build the foundation and then we can start to supplement with supplements. So I hope that this episode was helpful. I hope it has been eye-opening and awakening on how you can manage your blood sugars in really seamless, kind of easy lifestyle change ways. But if you want some more help on these things, and if you are even doing these things and you're like, I still don't feel my best, I need deeper help, this is where getting the right kinds of labs and the right kind of support from a specialist who can look at your specific situation and figure out what your body needs is important. So you can always apply for coaching. Our coaching application should be in the show notes. If not, you can always shoot me a message on Instagram, and I'm happy to help you out and see if we can get you booked for a free consultation to figure out if you would be a good fit to work with our team. Thank you guys so much for listening. We'll be back next week with another great episode with 201 next week.
I love it.
Thanks for listening, you guys.
Bye, everybody.